Good evening, everyone. Yeah, audible and visible. Fine. Good evening, everyone. I hope everybody is doing good. Let's begin our class. रिस्पॉन्स पोर्टल ऑन कर देना. रिस्पॉन्स पोर्टल ऑन नहीं है, वो भी ऑन कर देना. Anyways, let's begin. So yesterday we discussed this circular model of economy, the simplistic one-person model of economy. In this one-person model of economy, we discussed there is a household and there is a firm. How do households and firm interact with each other? Households provide their factor services to the firm, and firms in return give payments in return for the factors of production, the factor services that the households provide. So one way the households and firm interact. The firms, their job is to produce goods and services which would be consumed by households. So firms produce those goods for which households provide factors of production to the firms. Using those factors of production, firms will produce goods which would be sold to the households. Households will buy those goods from the firms. How will households be able to buy? Households will spend money which they receive in form of incomes from the firm. So the circle is, this circular flow of income is like, the circular flow of money is like this. In the factor market, households provide factor services, land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship to the firm. In this factor market, the firms will pay to the households for the factor of production that they avail from the households. In the product market, firms using these factors of production will produce goods and services which would be sold to the households. Households will buy these goods and services from the firm using the incomes that they have got from the firms in return for providing factors of production. So we discussed this circular flow of income yesterday. First हमने ये discuss किया था, this simplistic model of economy, this one-person model of economy जो मैंने बोला था, ऋतिक रोशन of कौन प्यारे और Tom Hanks of Castaway. So we discussed this one-person model, and this simplistic model, it can be this simplistic model. The findings of the simplistic model were that the flow of arrows, these individual arrows, the flow on these individual arrows, the magnitude of flow on these individual arrows is equal, meaning that the value of goods, and services produced here, let's call it A, would be equal to the value of consumption expenditure received, let's call it B, should be equal to the amount of incomes received by the households, C. So the important point that why did we study this circular flow of income was to establish this identity, was to establish this relationship that A would be equal to B would be equal to C, meaning that value of output, value of goods produced, the value of output would be equal to value of expenditure, would be equal to value of expenditure, would be equal to value of incomes, We established this identity, by studying this particular model of our economy, this one-person model of economy. Now this is a very simplistic model. This model does not assume that there is any savings, does not assume that there is any government, does not assume that there is any external trade. That means it's a closed economy without a government, without any kind of savings, without any kind of provision for savings. So let's try to add, in today's class what we'll do is, we'll try to complicate this model, as in we'll try to bring it more closer to the real economy. The aspects, the features of real economy, we'll introduce those features in this model, try to complicate it a little bit, and then we are going to see that our essential conclusion of A is equals to B is equals to C. That is, the magnitude of flow on these arrows independently does not change. The value of goods produced will be equal to the value of expenditures done by the households or received by the firm would be equal to the value of incomes received by the household. So we are going to complicate our model a little bit today, and then we are going to conclude, then we are going to see that an essential conclusion will not change. In fact, yesterday we did this with savings. We introduced the aspect of savings here, and we said, let's assume that not all the income that the households receive is spent by them. Let's assume, यहाँ तक हमने assume किया था, till here we had assumed that all the income that they're receiving, they are spending. Let's assume some part of the income that they receive, they save. That is, they do not spend. What effect will it have? If the income that they receive, out of which some they save, therefore they will spend less. Hence, the magnitude of the arrow B will reduce. The amount of expenditure done by households would reduce. Point number one. How much would they spend? They would spend equal to the value of goods that the firm is selling. Because they are spending less, therefore value of goods that the firm is selling would be less. So because B has reduced, therefore A will reduce. Because firm is producing less number of goods this time, therefore firm will need less factors of production. In order to produce less goods than before, firm will require less factors of production. Hence, the payments that it will do for the factors of production that it utilizes to produce lesser number of goods would be less than before. Since B has reduced by an amount S, therefore A will also reduce by an amount S, and therefore C will also reduce by an amount S, S being the savings. The point being that even after introduction of savings, our essential conclusion of B, A and C being equal to each other, that does not change. Simply what has happened, the value that which A, B and C were equal to in the earlier instance, that value has changed. A, B and C earlier, they were equal to 400 rupees, let's say. In this instance, because 100 rupees is a saving, now they eventually become equal to 300 rupees. But the point is, in this economy, still A, B and C will be equal. Therefore, rather than being in a static equilibrium that their value always remains constant, they are more of in a dynamic equilibrium. What is meant by this term dynamic equilibrium? Dynamic means, now you will be able to understand better, what does this term dynamic mean? Dynamic means that if one changes, if B changes, then it will induce change in A, which will induce change in C. If any of A, B or C changes, if either of A, B or C changes, it will lead to a change in the remaining variables, which will again become equal to the variable with change. So therefore, all of these are in a dynamic equilibrium, not in a static equilibrium, but in a dynamic equilibrium. I hope this is clear to you. So this was the effect of introduction of savings. In fact, I used one term yesterday. I said that we will introduce the term leakages and injections. I'll clear this out. This identity, this will remain. This should be there in your minds always. A is equals to B is equals to C. That is, the value of goods produced equals to value of expenditure received equal to value of incomes earned. This should be there in your mind. I'll just rub it. So leakages, concepts of leakages and concepts of injections. These two concepts, I'll tell about these things. Leakages, anything that leads to, you can understand it, it's quite intuitive, you can understand. Leakages means anything that leads to reduction in the magnitude of flow on any of these arrows. Anything that will lead to reduction in magnitude of flow on any of these arrows, we'll call them leakages. Again, this is not a standard term, but it's a very common term. There is no standard economic definition of this term leakage, but it's intuitive, so uski zarurat bhi nahi hai. Whereas injection, anything that leads to increase in magnitude of items increase in magnitude of any of these arrows. Anything that leads to increase in A, increase in B or increase in C, we'll call those things as injections. Anything that leads to reduction on these numbers, we'll call them as leakages. So one leakage we have already seen in form of savings. Savings is usually, this is standard notation, savings is denoted by S, capital S. Savings को हम capital S से denote करते हैं. Another saving, let's introduce government here. Let's introduce one more item, government. Out of the income that households receive, some part of it would be taxed by the government. Government would, if we introduce government, that means we are introducing the element of taxation here. So let's introduce government here, and therefore now we'll be able to visualize very easily the incomes that these households are receiving. Not just that, it is not just that it can only be saved, rather it can also be taxed. It would also be taxed. T. Government would collect taxes from consumers on the incomes that they receive. So part of income would go out as taxes. Part of income would go out as taxes. Therefore, if part of income goes out as taxes, the amount of expenditure done by the households on the goods produced by the firms will reduce. Amount of expenditure done by the households, जो income थी इनकी, out of that, if T is removed as taxes which the government consumes, then the amount of expenditure that the households would be doing on goods and services produced by the firm, that would reduce by this amount of T. What would government do by this with these taxes? What would government be doing with these taxes? If you realize it, government is just another special consumer here. गवर्नमेंट को आप एक कंज्यूमर की तरह देख सकते हो, who is earning some incomes in return for factors of production that it is providing. If you want to see government, you can see government as a household which is providing some factors of production. For example, government is providing security, government is providing administrative services, and in return, aren't they necessary for a firm to enable production? They are. Sense of security, law and order, administration, all the rules, regulations, they are also necessary for a firm to establish itself and carry out its functions. So if government is there, government will collect taxes in that regard. So if we look at factor market from the point of view of government, government collects taxes and in return government provides, अगर हम फैक्टर मार्केट देखें, गवर्नमेंट प्रोवाइड्स सर्टेन फैक्टर्स ऑफ प्रोडक्शन, गवर्नमेंट प्रोवाइड्स सर्टेन फैक्टर्स ऑफ प्रोडक्शन टू एवरीबॉडी, टू कंज्यूमर्स, टू हाउसहोल्ड्स, सबको गवर्नमेंट कुछ ना कुछ फैक्टर्स ऑफ प्रोडक्शन प्रोवाइड करती है. एट द सेम टाइम, फ्रॉम द टैक्सेस दैट इट रिसीव्स, गवर्नमेंट वुड बी स्पेंडिंग दीज टैक्सेस समवेयर in order to provide administration, which is a factor of production, in order to provide security, peace, which is again a factor of production, law and order maintenance, which is again a factor of production. Government would hire policemen and government would be paying salaries to those policemen. Or government would hire administrators and government would be paying salaries to those administrators. And therefore, this income that the government receives, the tax income that the government receives, in return for it, which provides factors of production, this income would be transferred as expenditure. Government would spend. Government, I'll write it here, government, factor market में and in, let's say, product market. Government provides factors of production and government receives payments in lieu of factor of production. At the same time, government does expenditure. Government का expenditure is not on buying some good. Government का expenditure is on salaries of its employees. So government will give salaries to its employees, which would eventually go back to the households. Government spends taxes. Government would spend taxes by paying salaries to its employees. That is one way that it can spend. Otherwise, let's say government spends taxes on buying computers for its offices, on buying fans for its offices, on buying lights, bulbs, tables, chairs for its offices. All that expenditure that the government would be doing on buying goods, that expenditure would go to firms. Firms, for example, firm was manufacturing fans As a household, I paid tax to the government, therefore the number of fans that I could buy was less. But when government receives tax from me, same money government will now use to buy fans from that manufacturer. So from the manufacturer's point of view, the number of fans simply sold to me have reduced. Point is, जो expenditure पहले मैं कर रहा था, 100 rupees of expenditure that I was doing, now I am doing 80 rupees expense and government is doing 20 rupees of expense. For the firm's point of view, expenditure that the firm received would be the same. Just that earlier it was receiving entire expenditure from me, now it will receive some expenditure from the government. So therefore, introduction of government and in this case taxes will also not change our essential equation. I'll repeat what I just said. Government को introduce करते हैं, so government collects taxes and in return for taxes, government spends those taxes. How does the government spends? Government spends those taxes by providing certain services to the people. How does government provide those services? Government will provide services by hiring people from households. People will provide their labor to government and therefore government will be paying to those people who are providing their labor to the government. Administrator, policeman, all these people would be paid salaries by the government. So tax comes to the government, part of it goes as salaries back to the household. So factor market में वो households के पास चला गया. Product market में part of the tax that government collects, part of it government uses to buy goods and services from the firms. So part of the tax that it collects goes in factor market, part of the tax that it collects goes in product market. So overall, households' incomes and firms' expenditures, the expenditure received by the firm, they are not going to change. I hope you can visualize this. This should be quite easy for you to visualize. So therefore, introduction of government or these taxes should also not alter our essential conclusion of A is equals to B is equals to C. Let's introduce one more leakage. Savings, taxes, imports. Imports are denoted by M, capital M. Consumers receive incomes in lieu of factors of production that they provide. If an economy is an open economy, in that case, it may be that not all the incomes that consumers receive, not all those incomes may be spent on goods produced by domestic firms. It may be that some of the incomes that household receives, some of them may be used to buy goods from abroad, that is foreign firms. This is the income that households received. ये income है households ने receive करी. Some of this income would be spent here and some of this income would be spent on imports. Point is, the amount of income which is spent on imports, this does not go to domestic producer. Consumer receives 100 rupees as income. Out of this, consumer spends 20 rupees on imports. 20 रुपए import पे spend कर दिए. Therefore, 80 rupees is spent on domestic firm. 80 रुपए, 80 rupees on domestic firm. 80 rupees is spent by this consumer on domestic firm. Domestic firm will receive an input of only 80 rupees. Domestic firm के पास expenditure कितना गया है? Of only 80 rupees. Domestic firm receives expenditure of 80 rupees, therefore it will be able to sell goods of only 80 rupees. Domestic firm फिर भी केवल 80 rupees के goods provide कर पाएगी. Therefore, it will be producing goods worth 80 rupees, hence it would be utilizing factors of production worth only 80 rupees. Hence, the incomes that it will pay would also be worth 80 rupees. So therefore, if imports happen, then again this dynamic equilibrium settles just like savings at a lower level. Like savings are there in the economy. Savings economy के अंदर ही हैं. Households decided to save, household decided not to spend. The household can decide at a later date to spend the savings. Therefore, this dynamic equilibrium which settled at a lower level this dynamic equilibrium can be increased again if the household decides to spend their saving. अगर household बाद में saving spend करेगा, this dynamic equilibrium can again be restored to a higher value. However, imports, if households decide to spend their money on imports, this money is permanently lost. Imports का पैसा, the money which is spent on imports, this money does not remain in the economy. So now economy would be in a permanently lower level of equilibrium. Because of imports, economy would be in a permanently lower level of equilibrium. I hope you get it, that imports. Again, introduction of imports would not change our conclusion. However, imports would lower this dynamic equilibrium to the effect of imports on this dynamic equilibrium would be that they would lower this dynamic equilibrium. Savings would also, but savings may again at a later date be spent and therefore equilibrium can be restored at a higher level again. However, in case of government तो economy के अंदर ही है, government is there in the economy. The amount of money that the government receives, it's merely a diversion of money. It's merely a diversion of money. Instead of households, it would be government which would be spending this money. Government would spend this money on some goods that it buys from firms and on households which it has employed to provide factors of production. The people who are employing their, who are providing their services, who are being employed by the government will provide salaries to them, plus government will buy some goods from the firm. The people who get salaries from the government, they will again use this money to buy from the firms. So government के case में, in case of government, the money still remains in the economy. The money is in the economy and the equilibrium does not change. Neither does it increase nor does it decrease. The equilibrium remains the same. Why? Because government is there, it's simply a diversion of who is spending money in the economy. But in case of savings, it leads to reduction which may be increased at a later date. In case of imports, it leads to permanent reduction. Let's talk about injections. I hope this concept of leakages are clear. Savings, taxes and imports. Injections. As we discussed, injection क्या है? Injection is we studied about equilibrium market price, then talking the current scenario, given that vaccine has positive impact and there is a huge demand for it. Why is it that demands by state and parties to influence and bring down the equilibrium market price? If by external factor the equilibrium market price comes down, the supplier will lose incentive to produce vaccines. Akshay will answer this question. This question is a little bit unrelated from this, but I'll answer this question. Let me finish this injections first and then I'll answer your question. So savings, taxes, imports, they were something that were leading to reduction of magnitude on these arrows, that is incomes, value of goods produced or consumption expenditure. But our essential conclusion still remained the same. Injections, injection के case में भी same चीज है. In case of injections, what are these injections? Anything that leads to increase in this magnitude. Let's say against the savings we have an injection called investments. I. Households decide to save. Where would households save? Households would save in, let's say, let's introduce another entity, financial institutions. Let's introduce financial institution here. So households would save in banks. Household would save their money in banks. If money is available with the banks which has been saved by households, this money can be accessed by firms. Firms can access this money. If households are not giving money to the firms through expenditure and rather they are choosing to save their money. Agar households apna money, if households are saving their money rather than spending their money on the firm, if they are choosing to save. Where do they save? They can save in financial institutions such as banks. If households decide to save their money here, then this money will become available to the firms to borrow. Firms can borrow this money and purchase capital goods. the savings of households which were creating a leakage, in fact, will create investment, will create conditions for investment in the economy. Firms will get this money which households are saving, and now firms will spend this money for buying capital goods from other firms. Firm A, which was producing, firm X, which was producing some output, now let's say firm X is not receiving money in form of consumption expenditure, but firm X can now receive money in form of borrowing, in form of investment expenditure from this financial institution. What will it do with that expenditure? It will buy some capital good. Some other firm, koi aur firm Y, firm X will spend money on firm Y. Firm X spending money on firm Y to purchase capital goods. So therefore, this total expenditure received by the firms will increase. Firms केवल B expenditure receive कर रहे थे. Now firms will be receiving expenditure in form of investment. Will be doing the total expenditure being done in the economy. Earlier was only this. Now expenditure done in the economy would also be investment expenditure. I'll repeat this thing. Earlier firms, how much expenditure were firms receiving? Firms were receiving an expenditure B. Now because of investments, some other firms will also receive expenditure. Instead of B, now the expenditure received will become B plus I. अब B plus I expenditure हो जाएगा. I'll repeat. Earlier expenditure received कितना था? B. Now a firm decides to borrow. Let's not bother from where it is borrowing. अभी bother नहीं करते हैं. Now the firm decides to borrow. The firm borrows, it invests, meaning it buys capital goods. That means some other firm will now have demand of goods that it is producing. Therefore, total expenditure received by the firms kitna hoga? Our firm X was receiving this expenditure B, and now the firm Y will be receiving investment expenditure I by this firm X. Firm X firm Y के ऊपर spend कर रही है. It's buying capital goods from firm Y. So therefore, total expenditure received by the firm kitna ho jayega? Total expenditure received by the firm would be B plus I. So therefore, increase in magnitude here. So this becomes a kind of an injection. Another injection. Government, we have already studied that second injection. Government expenditure. G. Again, I don't need to elaborate. I've already explained government expenditure. Government collects taxes. That becomes an injection. That becomes a leakage. Government does expenditure from those taxes. That becomes an injection. As simple as that. Government ने tax collect किया. It is reducing the income which households are receiving, which they can spend. Their disposable income is reducing. Now government decides to spend that expenditure. Therefore, it adds to total expenditure happening in the economy. So therefore, this also acts like a injection G. Government expenditure G. Another injection in the economy, exports, denoted by capital X, denoted by the letter capital X. It is not just the domestic consumers who will be buying goods produced by our domestic firms. Might be some foreign consumer will be buying goods from our domestic firm. Just like our domestic consumer can buy goods from a foreign firm in form of imports, a foreign consumer can buy goods from our domestic firm in form of, and that will form part of our exports. So that will also increase the total amount of expenditure, aggregate expenditure received by the firms. Firm का जो total expenditure receive करें, the amount of expenditure that firms are receiving, that will increase if there are exports. That means there are foreign buyers. So all these things, investments will increase total amount of expenditure that firms are receiving. Government expenditure will increase total amount of expenditure that firms are receiving. Exports will increase total amount of expenditure that firms are receiving. So all these things, I, G and X, they would form part of what is called as injections. They would increase the magnitude of flows on arrows, whereas leakages would reduce the magnitude of flow on arrows. At a given point of time, the sum of injections and sum of leakages, ये दोनों independent, these are largely independent things. Most importantly, imports and exports, they are completely independent of each other. At any point of time, injections and leakages may be equal to each other, one may be greater than the other, one may be less than the other. Depending upon which is greater, depending upon whether the total injections are greater or whether total leakages are greater, the economy would be either in a growing equilibrium or would be in a reducing equilibrium. If the net amount of injections is more as compared to total amount of leakages, then in every cycle, in every flow, the economy will be at a higher level. The economy, the magnitude of these arrows, income received, amount of goods produced, expenditure received by the firm, in every cycle that would be higher agar injections zyada hain. Therefore we say that economy would be growing, economy would be in a growth phase, growing. Remember yesterday's example of our fisherman? You catch fish worth 400 rupees. Somehow somebody else from another island also starts to buy fish from you worth 100 rupees. Therefore, your output in the next cycle will increase to 500. Income received by the household, which is providing those factor of production, will receive by 100 rupees to 500. Value of goods produced would also increase by 100 from 400 to 500. So therefore, economy would be in a growing equilibrium. On the other hand, if rather than consuming your own fish, some fish you import from somebody else, in that case, the total output would keep on reducing. So economy would be in a degrowth equilibrium, degrowth phase, reducing equilibrium. I hope this is clear. हाँ जी बताओ क्या समझ में नहीं आया? There are many students who are raising some concerns. Tell me, what did you not understand? हाँ जी, those people who are spamming बार बार जो hashtag #MeToo लिख रहे हैं, बताओ क्या नहीं समझ में आया? I'll explain again. If anything you want, if you want any more clarity on something. Anyways, if there is any question, kindly ask. Otherwise we'll move forward. So this was about the circular flow of income model in the economy, in which we discussed there are two agents primarily, the firms and households. Two primary agents, firm and households. Point number one. Point number two, the firms require factors of production to produce their output. From where will they get those factors of production? They will get them from households. Land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship would be provided by households to the firms. Number one. In return for factors of production that households provide, the firms will pay them factor payments. Number two. Number three. The firm will receive those factors of production and use them to produce some goods, some output. That output would be consumed by households. Households would do expenditure which would be equal to the value of goods produced by the firm. Now, in this simplistic model of economy, we introduce some complicating aspects. The complicating aspects were classified through injections and leakages. What are the injections? Anything that leads to increasing the output of the economy. What are leakages? Anything that leads to reduction in output of the economy. Leakages can be in form of savings. If households decide to save, therefore they would be spending less. Leakages can be in form of taxes. If government is there and it is taxing households, then again the amount of disposable income would be less and hence total output would reduce. If leakages are in form of imports, if somebody else from outside is importing, then that would also lead to diversion of your income to outside your economy and hence reduce the output of your economy. So these are leakages. What are injections? Investment. If a firm gets money from somewhere and it decides to invest, that is, it decides to buy capital goods. Firm buys capital goods from some other firms, then the total expenditure received by all the firms in the economy. Earlier, there was only one firm, X. Now there are two firms, X and Y. X is buying capital goods from Y. Two firms, X and Y, the total amount of expenditure received by all the firms increases. Earlier only X was receiving money in form of consumption expenditure. Now Y is also receiving money in form of investment done by the firm. So now the total amount of expenditure received by the firms increases. So therefore increase in the total output. Another injection, government spending. Government decides to spend money in the economy, and that would again increase the total amount of expenditure happening in the economy. So government expenditure becomes another injection. Third, exports. Rather than just your domestic consumers buying your output, buying goods from your economy, foreigners can also buy goods from your economies, and therefore that would also cause an injection, an increased output from your economy. So this is how a more realistic economy functions. In an economy, there are various agents, there are households, there are firms, there is government, there are financial institutions, there are foreigners. And these households, firms, government, financial institution, foreigners, they interact in a very dynamic manner. The way of their interaction, the way in which they interact is depicted through this chart, is depicted through this model, circular flow of income model, in which the essential conclusion is that the total value of goods produced in the economy is equal to the total amount of expenditure received in the economy, which is equal to the total amount of incomes earned in the economy. So this is the essential conclusion that we have seen from this model. However, these three values are not always equal to a same number. They keep on changing, and they keep on changing based on what? They keep on changing on the basis of injections or leakages in the economy. If the economy has more injections, that is more expenditure is being done in the economy, then economy would be in a growing equilibrium. If there are leakages in the economy, in that case economy would be in a reducing equilibrium. So this is what we have studied. Kindly explain investment again. What kind of investment? There are so many students writing here, chit-chatting here. I am not able to understand. Please write sequentially and in organized way so as to get clear understanding of this topic. अरे यार सब्सिडी की मैंने बात करी है. Have I talked about subsidy till now? Why are you jumping 2 steps ahead? देखो, what happens is I am explaining very basic things and you know far more than what I am explaining, and therefore what happens is you try to incorporate what all you know into what I have taught in the class, and therefore that creates confusion. तो इसीलिए अभी हम क्लास के साथ साथ चलते हैं. There are many students who might not have as advanced understanding of economics as you might have. Some of you might have. Therefore we have to move at a snail's pace, especially in these first few classes. अरे वी आर नॉट कॉमर्स बैकग्राउंड. क्या इसमें मैंने क्या कॉमर्स बैकग्राउंड वाली क्या चीज बताई है? व्हाई आर यू सो पेसिमिस्टिक भाई? व्हाई व्हाट इज इट दैट यू आर सेइंग यू आर ऑफ कॉमर्स बैकग्राउंड और समबडी इज ऑफ साइंस बैकग्राउंड? टाइम वेस्ट मत करो यार. I have explained entire thing again. I have summarized this entire chart again. Last time I am going to summarize what I have written here. Next page, next 5 slides से कर देता हूँ. This is a circular flow of income model of the economy. What is it that we are trying to do? We are trying to. अब सुनो, चैट पे ध्यान मत लगाओ अपना, देखने में, रिएक्ट करने में. इधर सुनो. This is a circular flow model of the economy. We are trying to visualize the flow of money in the economy. That how does money flow? What is the total output that the economy is producing? How are different agents in the economy interacting with each other? This is what we are trying to do with this model, circular flow model. It is one of the most basic models in the economy. And like any model is a simplistic representation of a real concept. There is no model which will take into account all realities, all complications. In that case, the model will never be made, and it would only be exceptions. So any model, it tries to simplify reality. Understand it like a cartoon. You view there are cartoons in newspapers. You are able to recognize whose cartoon is there in the newspaper. ठीक है? Sachin Tendulkar का cartoon है, नरेंद्र मोदी का cartoon है. You are able to recognize what is this cartoon character depicting. But that cartoon character is not exactly the photograph of Narendra Modi or Sachin Tendulkar or any other person whom that cartoon is trying to depict. It is a simplistic representation. But that simplistic representation is enough to explain the thing that the cartoon drawer is trying to explain to you. So any model is a simplistic. It doesn't need to be complicated with all the reality. So we start with simple model building and then try to apply it in the real world. So this simple model was that we have firms and households in an economy, and this economy is a closed economy without the government. Firms will produce output by using factors of production by the households. In return for factors of production that households provide to the firm will pay back to the households factor incomes. Number one. Number two, the output that the firms produce, that output would be sold to the households. Households would buy that output from the incomes that they have earned by providing factors of production to the firm. So households would spend on the firm. The value of goods that the firm produces, would then be equal to the value of expenditure that household does, or value of expenditure that the firm receives, which would be equal to value of factor incomes that the household received by the firm. This was a simplistic model. Then from this model we arrived at the conclusion that the value of goods produced is equals to value of expenditure done is equals to value of income received. ये conclusion पे हम आए. Then we started to complicate our model. Complicate our model by introducing the concept of savings, taxes, imports. By introducing the concept of investment, government expenditure, exports. हमने अपने मॉडल को, जो सिंपल मॉडल था, उसको रियल वर्ल्ड में अप्लाई करने की, we try to apply it to the real world. Introduction of savings, taxes and imports does not change the essential conclusion that our model is telling, that value of A is equals to B is equals to C, dynamic equilibrium वाली चीज. Similarly, introduction of government expenditure, investment and exports also does not change our essential conclusion of A is equals to B is equals to C. Simply that the amount of leakages or the amount of injections would decide whether the economy is in a growing equilibrium or is it in a reducing equilibrium. Total magnitude of expenditure done in the economy, is it increasing? It will increase when government spends more. It will increase when foreigners buy from your economy. It will increase when there is more investment in your economy. The total expenditure in the economy will reduce if people start to save more. Rather than spend, people save. If government taxes more, then the disposable income with you would be less. If you import more rather than buying from your own economy, all those things would result in less amount of expenditure being done in the economy. Whether the expenditure is increasing or is it decreasing will depend upon which of the two factors, leakages or injections, is dominant over the other. If leakages are dominant over injections, the net amount of expenditure being done in the economy, hence the value of goods produced in the economy, hence the value of incomes received in the economy would keep on reducing. On the other hand, if net amount of injections is more as compared to leakages, in that case, net expenditure done in the economy would grow. Therefore, net value of goods produced by the firms in the economy would grow. Hence, firms' payments in form of factors of production to households would also grow. So therefore, economy would be in a growing equilibrium. This is what I have explained. Itna simple concept. So this is this general economic model consisting of various entities that interact in the economy. Essential conclusion again finally being that value of goods produced is equals to value of expenditure received is equals to value of incomes earned. Now, in our chapter of national income accounting, our focus is to find out, our objective is to find out what is the total value of output that an economy is producing. Economy mein total output kitna hai? What is the total value of output that is being produced in the economy? And we have seen the value of output, how much worth of goods is being produced in the economy. The value of output would be equal to value of expenditure, would be equal to value of incomes. This is what we have seen. In fact, measuring the total output of the economy through these three approaches is what we use in calculation of the total output. The total output of an economy, is equals to total expenditures received in an economy is equals to total incomes earned in an economy. This is our essential conclusion. Our objective is to find this. Total output of an economy. And in order to find this, we have seen that this can be found using this method, These are three different approaches to measuring the total value of economy, the total value of output produced in the economy. The first approach in which we measure what we are trying to measure, जो हम measure कर रहे हैं हम उसको उसी तरीके से finding out the value of goods produced in the economy. What is the total value of output produced in the economy? This method is called production method or production approach. This is called production approach or production method. Production approach में we try to measure the total value of output produced. Let's say we'll discuss how we measure output in production method. We'll go to every firm and find out what is the value of output that you have produced. एक firm से जाके, there are millions of firms in the economy. We'll go and ask each firm that how much is the value of goods that you have produced. This is what we do in production method. We'll explain, we'll discuss what is it that exactly what we do. But for now, understand broadly ये करते हैं. This is also equal to total expenditure received or total expenditure done in the economy. So what we'll do here, we'll calculate the total value of expenditure done by various entities in the economy. Anybody who is spending any money in the economy, will go to that person and ask how much money have you spent. Anybody, I am spending money, you are spending money, anybody else, Reliance Industries is spending money, government is spending money. Anyone who is spending any money in the economy, go and ask them that आपने कितना पैसा खर्च किया, how much money have you spent, total expenditures. This is called expenditure method or expenditure approach. Expenditure method or expenditure approach. The third, total incomes. As you would have guessed by now, in this method of measuring the total output of economy, what we do is we sum up all the incomes received in the economy. Anybody who is receiving any kind of income, anybody, you will ask me, you will ask somebody else, your family head who is earning income, you will ask them how much incomes everybody is earning. Reliance Industries is earning profits, I am earning some money, Vision IAS is earning some money, you are earning some money, your parents are earning some money. Each and every person's earnings, each and every person's incomes, all kind of incomes would be added here, and from that you will find out what is the total amount of income earned in the economy. Calculating the output through this approach is called income method or income approach. Income approach or income method. These are the three methods that we use to calculate the final value, the total value of goods produced in the economy. Production method, expenditure method, and income method. These are three methods that we are going to have a look at. Expenditure approach, income approach, and production approach. In the expenditure approach and income approach, which are very simple and straightforward. when calculating the output, I have not yet used the term GDP, when calculating the total output in the economy through income approach, through income method, what we do is we sum up all the incomes received. The formula is quite simple. You simply, income would be received for any factor production. Incomes को define कैसे किया है? Income is income which is received for any factor of production which is provided. So anybody who is providing any kind of factor of production, that person would receive some income. 4 factor of production basically: land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship. So measuring the total output of the economy from income approach would simply mean that the total output of the economy would be equal to rent plus wages plus interest plus profits. This is what the total output of your economy from income approach would look like. Quite simple, बहुत ही simple है. Income approach, total income of the economy, total incomes earned in the economy would be rent plus wages plus interest plus profits. Incomes earned by factor of production, so total income यही होगी. This is what total income would be in the economy. So this is measuring of output from income approach. Measuring of output from expenditure approach. This is also quite simple, very simple. Expenditure approach say, how do we measure income? We identify who is doing what expenditure. We'll see that there is one expenditure being done by households. All the expenditures done by households. Households का मतलब क्या है? All expenditure being done on consumer goods. All expenditure being done on consumer goods. There are 2 types of final goods, consumer and capital. All expenditure being done on consumer goods by households. By households. We'll call that as consumption expenditure, denoted as capital C. All expenditure done by businesses, all the businesses in the economy, they would also be buying. Firm X would be buying from firm Y. Some capital good would be bought. Reliance Industry would buy some machinery from any other industry. That is expenditure of Reliance Industries. That expenditure of Reliance Industry would be investment expenditure. Reliance Industry ने चाय बिस्किट खरीद, we discussed this. Reliance Industry buys chai and biscuit, that is their consumption expenditure. That would be here, consumption. Reliance Industry buys a machinery, capital good, that is their investment expenditure. So if we categorize all the expenses happening in the economy, all the expenditures happening in the economy, all the expenditures would fall into these various categories, these 4 basic categories. 1, the household expenditure, which is this consumption expenditure. Second, investment expenditure done by businesses. How would they do? Business expenditure on another firm. Businesses spend money on another firm. I, investment expenditure. Government expenditure, we denote it separately. Government expenditure will comprise of, essentially government expenditure will comprise of mostly household, mostly consumption expenditure by the government. That would be the maximum. Some expenditure would also be investment expenditure by the government, that we are going to see when we study our fiscal policy chapter later date. But because government is a separate and a very big entity, इसलिए government का expenditure हम अलग कर देते हैं. This is purely household, this is purely firms, and this is purely government. We denote government expenditure separately. Why? Because government is a separate entity. Expenditure done by the government expenditure is G. And there is net foreign expenditure done by the foreigners. Foreigners would, net foreign expenditure done, foreigners would buy goods from your economy in form of exports. So this is the foreign expenditure on exports. X is how much amount of exports you are doing. Please listen very carefully here. Households ने total expenditure किया C, businesses ने total expenditure किया I, government ने total expenditure किया G, and foreigners ने total expenditure किया X. Foreigners have spent X in your economy. Now, out of the total consumption expenditure by households, some of that expenditure would have been done on foreign firms. तो domestic firms पे कितना होगा? C minus, let's call it CM. CM, the M subscript denoting imports. M manne imports. Similarly, total investment expenditure I is done by firms. Out of total expenditure of I, some would have been done domestically, some would have been done on buying machinery from foreign countries. Reliance Industry buys some machinery from some foreign country. That would amount to imports. So वो import expenditure होगा. So what is the total expenditure done by Reliance Industry in India domestically? I minus IM. Similarly, government may have imported something from abroad. So government's expenditure in the economy would be G minus GM. The total expenditure in the economy के अंदर total expenditure कितना हो रहा है? Total expenditure done in the economy would be C plus G plus I plus X minus CM minus GM minus IM. This is the total amount of expenditure being done. Properly लिख देता हूं. Total expenditure done in the economy, consumption, that is household expenditure in the economy, expenditure done in the economy, in this word in is very important, in the economy. Consumption expenditure would be C minus CM. Government expenditure would be G minus GM. Investment expenditure would be I minus IM. And foreigners, they are doing some expenditure, exports, in form of exports. What foreigner or foreign expenditure? Foreigners expenditure. This would be X. Foreigner is doing X. The total expenditure done would be expenditure done by all these entities, which would be equal to C minus CM plus G minus GM plus I minus IM plus X. These imports, we'll club them together and use the value, and categorize them as the total imports of the country, which would be equal. Total imports of the country, which would be denoted by the letter M, capital M. So this would be C plus G plus I plus X minus M. This is called as net exports. So from expenditure method, the total value of output in the economy would be total amount of expenditure done in the economy. Total expenditure done in the economy would be C minus CM, G minus GM, I minus IM and X. Clubbing all these things together, we denote them by the capital letter M, which is the total imports. Hence, from expenditure side, the total amount of goods, the value of goods produced in the economy from expenditure approach, from expenditure method would be C plus G plus I plus X minus M. C plus G plus I plus X minus M. This is the total value of goods produced in the economy from expenditure approach. From expenditure approach, we get C plus G plus I plus X minus M. Value of output from expenditure approach. Value of output from income approach, rent plus wage plus interest plus profit. Value of output from expenditure approach, C plus G plus I plus X minus M. I hope this is clear to everyone. Expenditure approach and income approach. Now let's come to production method, product approach, production method. What is production method? Production method is simply in which we are trying to arrive at the total output at the firm level. See, in income approach, we calculated total incomes earned by factors of production. That was our income approach. In expenditure approach, we tried to calculate the total amount of expenditure being done in the economy. What are the various agents doing expenses? Households, businesses, government and foreigners. They are doing some expenses. So we summed up all the expenses being done in the economy, not outside the economy, in the economy. So we reduced our imports and therefore we arrived at total expenditure being done in the economy. So that was our expenditure approach. The third method is the production method or the product method. In product method, what do? In product method, we try to sum up. In product method, we try to sum up the value of goods produced by the firms in the economy. All the firms in the economy, what is the value of goods that they are producing? Value of goods that they are producing are equal to incomes earned and also are equal to expenditure earned. ये तो हमने देखा है. A is equals to B is equals to C. Value of goods produced is equals to value of expenditure done is equals to value of incomes earned. We have calculated incomes earned. We have calculated expenditures received. We have calculated this. But we also want to calculate the actual value intrinsically. We have to calculate the value of A. A is equals to B is equals to C. हमने ये चीज में अभी we have calculated the value of B and value of C. So therefore we know what is the value of A. We know what is the, हमें A की value तो पता है. We know that A's value is equal to this is equal to this. We know that value is this. But now we are going to intrinsically find out the value of A. Rather than finding out the value of A using the value of B or C, we are going to find out what is the intrinsically calculated value of A. So when we calculate actual value of goods produced in the economy, we call that calculation of output through the product method or production method. So that is what product method is. I hope this is clear that what are we trying to calculate? क्या calculate करना चाह रहे हैं हम, ये clear हुआ कि नहीं? We are trying to calculate the actual value of output produced by the firms in the economy. Let's try to calculate this using this production method. Let's try to calculate. I think in your NCERT, the example given, that's beautiful example given. Those of you who have read it would be able to relate and understand it quite well. But that is a very common example given almost every year, everywhere, where you find out value of calculation of GDP through product method. The simple example is that you have a farmer who is growing wheat. You have a bread maker, a bakery, bread maker who makes bread from this wheat. You have a restaurant who buys bread from and let's say sells you sandwich. Sells you sandwich. So these are three entities. Let's assume for a minute that there are only three entities in the economy. केवल तीन लोग हैं economy के अंदर. The farmer who is using nothing but, let's assume, who is using nothing but his labor. Nothing but his labor. Let's assume for a minute who is using nothing but his labor to produce wheat. Farmer produces wheat. Farmer produces wheat worth rupees 100. Value of production. Value of production. Farmer produces wheat worth rupees 100. Okay. Out of this 100 rupees wheat, ये जो 100 rupees की wheat है, out of this wheat, he sells 50 rupees wheat to this bakery. 50 rupees of wheat is sold to this bakery. To make bread, 50 rupees of wheat is sold. This bakery would use his labor, would use his or her skills to prepare bread from wheat. Wheat थी यहाँ पे, you had wheat here, and you would use your skills to prepare bread from this wheat. The value of bread produced from this 50 rupees is, let's say, 300 rupees. 300 रुपए की bread तैयार करी. You have prepared bread worth 300 rupees from this wheat of 50 rupees. Out of this bread of 300 rupees, you sell bread worth 100 rupees to this sandwich maker. To this restaurant, you have sold bread worth 100 rupees so that this person can prepare sandwiches. From the bread that he buys, he is buying bread worth rupees 100, and let's assume that there is no other input, or let's assume for a moment that there is no other input that he is using to prepare sandwiches. From this 100 rupees worth of bread, he is selling sandwiches. He is preparing and selling sandwiches worth rupees 500. 500 रुपए का आउटपुट सैंडविच का बना रहे हैं. He is selling sandwiches worth rupees 500. So value of production, please mind, value of production of farmer is 100. Value of production of this bakery is 300. Value of production of this restaurant, this sandwich maker, is 500. What is the total value of output in the economy? Total output. Total output. What is the total value of output in the economy? Economy में total output कितना है? What is the total output? 100 plus 300 plus 500, would it be the total output of the economy? Answer should be no. We would have a discussion in the class, but answer, I think you know, the answer is obviously no. The total output of the economy, if we sum up 100 plus 300 plus 500 and say that this is the total output, this would be a wrong answer. Why? Because this 100, part of it is being consumed. 50 rupees out of this 100 is being consumed to prepare bread. This 300, part of it is being consumed to prepare sandwich. So in this 500 rupees, ये जो 500 rupees है, in this 500 rupees, there is included the value of this 100 rupees. In this 300 rupees, there is included the value of this 50 rupees. 300 rupees includes this 50. 500 rupees includes this 100. Therefore, if we add simply 500 to 300 and 200, then we are double counting two values. We are double counting this value of 50 rupees and double counting this value of 100 rupees. So therefore, this is not the total value of output in the economy. Our economy is not producing this much output. The output of the economy would be 100 rupees by farmer, farmer's output 100 rupees, bakery's output, bakery's output is 300 minus 50 rupees worth of inputs that he has consumed. 300 minus 50 rupees worth of inputs that he has consumed. And restaurant's output, restaurant का कितना है? Restaurant's output is 500 minus 100 rupees worth of inputs that they have consumed. This 400 rupees is the net output of restaurant, 250 rupees is the net output of bakery, and 100 rupees is the net output of farmer. This term that I am using, 400, 100 here and 250, this is what is called as value added. इसको हम बोलते हैं value added. Value added. What is meant by the term value added? Value added is how much value is being added at a particular stage. How much value is being added by a particular producer, by a particular manufacturer. How much value is it that they are adding? Bread maker कितनी value add कर रहा है? He is adding a value of 250 rupees, 300 minus 50. Restaurant owner, how much value is he adding? He is adding a value of 500 minus 100, that is 400 rupees. Value added by restaurant is 400. Value added by bakery is 250. Value added by farmer is 100. Therefore, the total value produced in the economy, total value of output in the economy is 100 by the farmer, 250 by the bakery, and 400 by the restaurant, which becomes equals to 750. 750 is the total output of the economy. Total output of the economy. Total output of the economy 750 rupees. 100 rupees added by the farmer, 250 rupees added by the bakery, and 400 rupees added by the restaurant. Sum up all these, you get a value of 750 rupees, which is the actual output produced in the economy. Not a sum of 900 rupees, 500, 300, 100, not a sum of 900 rupees, but a sum of 750 rupees is the value of output produced in the economy. This thing, 100, 250, 400, as I said, this is called as value added. इसको हम बोलते हैं value added. What are we doing to arrive at total value, total output of the economy? To arrive at total output in the economy, is equals to sum of value added individually by all producers or firms in the economy. Total output of the economy, your 750 rupees was equals to sum of value added individually by everybody. Farmers is one firm, bakery is another firm, plus restaurant is another firm. Value added by farmer, value added by bakery, value added by restaurant. Sum of value added by everybody in the economy, which was obviously 100 plus 250 plus kitna tha? 400. The important point is output is sum of value added by everybody. Total output, total value of output is equals to sigma sum of value added I representing I is equals to 1 to n. I hope nobody is confused in this notation. बहुत ही standard notation, 10th class में पढ़ लेते हैं इस चीज को. Sigma representing sum, VA value added by ith firm, first firm farmer, second firm bakery, third firm restaurant. So I is equals to 1 to n, capital N denoting all the firms in the economy. So this is the total value of output in the economy, value added individually by each firm. Therefore, from this production method, the total value of output produced in the economy is nothing but sum of value added individually by all the firms. Sum of value added individually by all the firms, that is what is total value added in the economy. Output from production method. I hope this is clear. Okay. Quite easy, I guess this is quite easy. Production method. The implications of production method are far-fetched. From production method, we are able to realize a very simple concept that the total output in the economy would be equal to sum of value added by all the firms in the economy. If you want to realize it, you can realize it like this. I mean, I hope this is clear to everybody. In your economy, there are millions and millions of producers. I and N key value, this is millions. There are so many firms in the economy and every firm is producing some output. What is it that we wanted to measure in the first place? देखो इसकी practical application बता रहा हूँ तो थोड़ा ध्यान लगाओ यहाँ पे. What is it that we wanted to measure in the first place? We wanted to measure what is the total output that the economy is producing. What is the value of total goods that the economy is producing? That is what we want to calculate. Now there is Reliance Industries, there is Tata Group, there is thousands of Wipro Group, there is Infosys, there is small vendors, corner shops. There are so many firms in the economy. If you want to find out the total value of goods produced in the economy, Let's say you go to a corner shop, let's say you go to a stationery shop. What is the value of goods produced by that stationery shop? What is the value added by that stationery shop? That would be the respective output of that shop. उस shop का output कितना है? Sandwich maker, restaurant. Rather than going to the restaurant and asking that what is the value of sandwich that you have sold, अगर आप restaurant का 500 rupees add कर दोगे, the value of sandwich that they are selling is 500 rupees. You go to a corner stationery shop, you ask what is the total value of goods that is there in your shop. He will say I have goods worth 1 lakh rupees. So will the output of that firm, that shop will be 1 lakh rupees? That shop has goods worth 1 lakh rupees, but the point is he has purchased those goods for 80,000 rupees. Therefore, his individual contribution there is 20,000. Sandwich maker mein, he has purchased goods worth 100 rupees and he is selling them for 500 rupees. So his individual contribution is 400. You are summing up the individual contribution of all the firms in the economy in this production method. I'll repeat what I just said. In production method, I hope that you have understood this. ये basic चीज आप समझ गए हो. Now I'm trying so that you realize it in practical aspect. You realize it in real economy. That what is actually happening. What did we do in production method? We summed up in order to find out the total value of output of the economy. What did we do? We summed up the total value added by all the firms. Value added by farmer, value added by bread maker, value added by sandwich maker. We summed up the value added by every firm in the economy, not the value of their output. हमने 300 और 500 add नहीं किया. We did not add 300 and 500. We added 250 and 400. So realize this. इसको feel करने की कोशिश करो. What is it that we are doing? We are adding the value added by an individual firm. In order to find out the total value of output produced in the economy, what we do is we sum up the value added by all the firms in the economy. And that way we find out what is the value of total output produced in the economy. This is what is there in product method or production method. In a few minutes, I'll introduce you to the concept of GDP. I'll introduce you to the concept of GDP in a few minutes. GDP is value of output. I have not yet used the definition of GDP. GDP is value of output. Through this production method, this is equals to sigma of gross value added by all firms in the economy. Gross value added by all firms in the economy. This is what our GDP is from production method. I'll explain what GDP is. अभी तक मैंने GDP को introduce नहीं किया है. I've restrained myself from using the term GDP, but now we are going to introduce this in next few minutes only. In your NCERT, there is one important point that is mentioned. I like to emphasize that point. That point is regarding inventories. So I have specially included that point regarding inventories. They have given an explanation of inventory, changes in inventory, and how does this affect the total output on the economy. So I like to explain this concept of inventory when I have explained the concept of product method. Product method हमने देखा क्या है. अब inventory का concept देख लेते हैं. A little bit deviation from what we were discussing. Concept of inventory is also important. So inventory, I hope you know what inventory. Inventory is stock of unsold goods. You planned to sell 1000 units in a particular year, but you were able to sell only 800 units. So therefore 200 units are unsold. 200 units आपके unsold है. That is what your inventory is. Last year's inventory is itself 100 units. Last year आपके पास, when this year began, you were not able to sell 100 units. This year you produced 1000, you sold only 800, so 200 is the addition to inventory this year. So this year your inventory is increased from 100 to 300, 200 being the addition of this year. एक important disclaimer है जो NCERT में दिया. There is an important disclaimer which is mentioned in NCERT, and therefore I feel that there is a need for me to emphasize it here. Inventories of firm are treated as investment expenditure. Inventories are treated. This is a convention. This is a convention. There is a convention. There is no explanation here. What is investment expenditure of the firm? Investment expenditure is the firm expenditure done by the firm in procurement of capital goods. It buys capital goods. It buys machinery and that is what we call as investment expenditure. Investment expenditure also includes inventories, changes in inventory. By convention, this is by convention, that whatever the change in inventory is there, 200 units are unsold, we will consider them as an investment by the firm. This is a convention. There is no logical explanation here. By convention, we designate inventories as investments. Inventories are treated as investments. Inventories are treated as investments. Through these equations, I have tried to summarize this production method. Through these equations, I have tried to summarize this production method. Inventory wala I have explained to you what inventory is. Value added by a firm. Value added by a firm, VAI. Restaurant making sandwiches is equals to value of output produced 500 rupees minus value of intermediate goods 100 rupees worth of bread. Value added is equals to value of output minus value of intermediate goods. We have explained this. I have just summarized this here on this particular slide. We call this as value added by the firm is equals to total value of output produced minus intermediate goods which are represented by Z. Intermediate goods का जो representation है, we do it by Z. This is just a mathematical explanation. If you look at this term, value of output produced, important concept coming up, please pay attention here. Value of output produced is equals to 1000 shirts you have produced in a particular year, 800 you have sold and 200 you have not been able to sell. 800 बेची और 200 नहीं sell करी. How much did you produce? How much was produced in the economy? 1000 were produced. 800 were sold. 200 were not sold. They accumulated in form of inventory. I hope this is absolutely clear to everybody. You produced 1000 goods, you sold 800, you did not sell 200. 800 is amount that you have sold, 200 is amount that you produced but did not sell, could not sell. In our discussion till now, we have been focusing on the idea of total output of the economy. हमने focus किया है idea of total output of the economy. How much is economy producing? However, we can distinguish between two events, event of production and event of sale. ये दो अलग-अलग event हैं. A firm produces and a firm sells its production. When a firm produces, it would have employed factors of production in producing that thing. 1000 shirts were produced, therefore how much incomes would have been paid to factors of production? Incomes for 1000 shirts, 1000 shirts के लिए income pay की गई होंगी for those 1000 shirts. Point number one. However, how much shirts did it sell? It sold 800. So how much expenditure was received? Expenditure receive हुआ है केवल 800 का. Produce हुई थी 1000, Incomes have been paid for 1000, value of output, that is production, is 1000, but expenditure received, expenditure कितना हुआ है, that is 800. So mismatch हो गया ना, expenditure received versus amount produced. Why? Because entire production was not sold. There is a difference in entire production and what was sold. What is the difference? 200 is the difference. I hope everybody is following me. I'll repeat it one more time so that those who were not following may follow now. I said we are discussing the concept of total output, total production in the economy. Total output कितना produce हुआ है. We can now distinguish between the idea of production and sales. How much has been produced and how much has been sold. A firm produces 1000 units of some item. It will pay factors of production for those 1000 units. Labor ने तो 1000 units produce किया है, therefore it will be paying for those 1000 units. However, it is able to sell only 800 units. So therefore expenditure that it receives would be for only 800 units. So there is a difference between amount of produced and amount sold. And what is that difference? The difference is 200 in this case. This 200 difference is the change in is inventory of the firm. How much you did not sell, that accumulated, that led to accumulation of inventory. And we discussed inventory is treated as investment. Inventory is treated as investment. So what we'll assume here, that 200 rupees of unsold goods, which is your inventory, which is treated as investment, therefore 200 rupees we will assume is the investment expenditure received by the firm. हम assume करेंगे by convention. I said by convention we assume that inventories would be treated as investment. We'll assume that this 200 rupees, the inventories that have accumulated for the firm, this is investment expenditure received by the firm. Firm ने इतना investment expenditure receive किया है. Therefore, total expenditure received by the firm becomes 800, the goods that it sold, plus 200 investment expenditure. And why is this 200 investment? This 200 is investment because inventories are treated as investment. So change in inventory would be counted as your investment expenditure. इससे ज़्यादा slowly और इससे ज़्यादा प्यार से मैं नहीं पढ़ा सकता हूं. I hope this should be clear to everybody. Value of output produced is what we wrote here. Value of output produced. Value added is equals to value of output produced minus value of intermediate goods. Value of output produced can be written as value of value of sales plus value of change in inventories. Value of output produced can also be written as value of sales plus value of change in inventories. So minus ZI, that is value of intermediate goods. So this is your GVA, gross value added by the firm. In order to calculate the gross value added by the firm, what we do is we calculate value of output minus value of intermediate goods, which is equals to value of sales plus value of change in inventories minus value of intermediate goods. From this, when you subtract depreciation, this is the gross value added by firm. From this you subtract depreciation. कल हमने डिस्कस किया था depreciation के ऊपर. Out of the total output produced by the firm, value of total output produced by the firm, वो किसके equal है? Value of sales plus change in inventories minus value of intermediate goods. Some of the expenditure would have been done by the firm in order to repair its machinery, in order to replace some part of the machinery that have deteriorated, that have worn out and torn out. That would be depreciation expenditure that the firm incurs. Firm ने incur किया depreciation expenditure. Firm has incurred depreciation expenditure also. If we reduce from the total output of the firm, if we subtract the depreciation expenditure, we'll get net value added by the firm. If you want to realize this net value added, think of it like this. 500 rupees is the value of sandwiches sold by this restaurant. 500 rupees sandwich maker ne, they have sold sandwich, he has sold sandwiches worth 500 rupees. Out of this 500 rupees, some money would have been spent, let's say, in repairing the sandwich maker. जो भी चीज था, your capital good and you are repairing some money, you are spending some money in repairing. So therefore, what is the net value of sandwiches sold? 500 rupees की तो sandwich आपने sell किए हैं. You have sold sandwiches worth 500 rupees. But from those 500 rupees, some money is going in repairing your capital good, repairing your machinery. Let's say 20 rupees is going in repairing your machinery. Therefore, what is the net value added by this person? Net value added कितनी होगी? 500 minus 100, that is the value of inputs, minus 20, that is value that you are spending in repairing of your goods, repairing of capital good, depreciation expenditure. Your gross value added, the total value this sandwich maker added was 500 minus 100, that is 400. The net value added by this sandwich maker is 400 minus 20, that is 380 rupees. I hope this is clear to everybody. Depreciation, you subtract depreciation from gross, you get net. Subtract depreciation from gross, you get net. NVA, net value added, is equals to GVA minus D. Net value added is equals to gross value added minus depreciation. Now is the time for me to introduce the concept of GDP, gross domestic product. Gross domestic product. Now is the time to introduce. Why did I wait so long? Because I wanted you to realize the difference between production and sales. इन दोनों के बीच में difference जानना जरूरी था. That is why I held myself to use this term GDP till now. Output produced and sales are different. Output produced comprises of sales plus change in inventories. By how much your inventories change, how much you were not able to sell in a particular year out of the total amount that you produce in a particular. So there's a difference between output, that is what you have produced, and the sales, how much you have actually sold. Now let's understand this concept of GDP. Extremely important, at the same time very easy. GDP. Please remember the definition of GDP and you will never ever make a mistake in any question. Always remember what is the definition of this thing, GDP. Definition is final value of goods and services produced in an economy. Final value of goods and services produced in an economy in a given time period, usually a year. This is what the definition of GDP is. I'll explain each and every term in this definition. Very, very important definition. Basic, maybe some of you know this definition. Others who don't know, kindly remember it. Final value, I'll explain each and every term, don't worry about it. I'm just repeating the definition. Final value of goods and services, all goods and services produced in an economy in a given time period, usually a year. This is how we define something called GDP. GDP is one of the ways in which we measure the national income. National income accounting kar rahe hain. One of the ways, one of the common metrics that we use to measure national income is GDP, gross domestic product. GDP is the value of output. Value of output that an economy produces. And how do we define it? We define it as final value of goods and services produced in an economy in a given time period, usually a year. Now let's focus on each and every word here. Pehla word kya hai? Final value. First word is final value. What do you mean? What should you understand by this term final value? Final value ka matlab hai, the term final value means only final goods and services are counted. Only final goods and services are counted. Please focus on each and every word independently. Final value means only final goods and services are counted. Of goods and services produced in an economy. Produced means production or output. Importantly, not sales. It doesn't matter whether goods have been sold or not. What matters is whether they have been produced or not, whether they have come into existence or not. It doesn't matter whether they have been sold. If a firm has produced them, they would be part of GDP. So production is important, not sales. You could have defined GDP as final value of goods and services sold in an economy. आप वैसे भी कर सकते थे. But convention is, standard definition is that GDP is final value of goods and services produced, not sold. Important thing is not sales, production. In, the word in, what is meant by this term in? In means geographical boundaries. Geographical boundary of an economy. In an economy. In means geographical boundary. You are talking about production within specified geographical limits. The word in here signifies geographical limits, geographical boundary. You are defining production which is happening within a predefined geographical boundary. For example, what is the for example, Indian Embassy in United States. Indian Embassy in United States. Washington DC में Indian Embassy, New York में Indian Embassy. Now embassy, Washington DC में, embassy is considered as an area of the country in a foreign country. American Embassy in Chanakyapuri in India, in New Delhi. American Embassy in Chanakyapuri in New Delhi, that is American territory. Similarly, Indian Embassy in USA is India's territory. Therefore, output which is produced in Indian Embassy, even though it is located in USA, but geographically हम क्या मानेंगे? That is Indian territory. Indian Embassy अमेरिका में जो है, that is Indian territory. American Embassy जो इंडिया में है, that is American territory. American territory, let's say American Embassy में there is a school here. In American Embassy एक school है. That school charges fee to students, fee from students. So therefore there is an output, educational services are being provided, so therefore there is an output there which the school is producing. Where will that output of that school be counted? School located in American Embassy in India, in New Delhi, school located in American Embassy in India, where would the fee, the services that the school is providing, where would those services be counted as? Would they be counted as part of India's GDP or America's GDP? I hope your answer is that they would be counted as part of American GDP. They are American GDP. Why? Because an embassy is territorially part of the country to which that embassy belongs. So American Embassy जो इंडिया में है वो American geography का part है. Indian Embassy जो अमेरिका में है वो Indian geography का part है. So important point here to know is what is meant by this term in. Final value of goods and services produced in an economy. In means geographical boundary. You have to always focus on where the production is taking place. Up to 12 nautical miles from your coastline, up to 12 nautical miles is the extent of your territory. From your coastline up to 12 nautical miles is the extent of your territory. So therefore, whatever production happens in those 12 nautical miles, India की land boundary नहीं है. That's not India's land, but it's India's waters. That's our internal water, that is part of our territory. So whatever production happens in those 12 nautical miles would again be counted as part of India's GDP. Why? Because it is territorially located within our boundaries. I hope this is clear. The emphasis on this word in. Final value of goods and services produced in an economy. Economy. What is meant by this word economy here? The word economy here means economy in conjunction with the word value here in the first line. Economy means goods that have economic value. Goods that have economic value. Only those goods would be counted, goods and services, only those goods and services would be counted that have economic value. Not goods which have emotional value, for example. They would not be counted. Goods that can be sold in the market. Goods that can be bought or sold. Market ke andar, there is a buyer, there is a seller, and they agree to provide for any goods. Those goods would be counted here. Goods which cannot be sold in the market, which are not sold in the market, those goods would not be counted. For example, food that is prepared in your home, is it sold? No, it's not. Is it a good service? Also, probably your mother is cooking, or somebody in your home is cooking who is not charging for that. If a cook is cooking, if you have employed some maid who is cooking food for you, then that is part of GDP, because that is the service exchange that is being sold in the market. You are paying, let's say, 3,000 rupees, 4,000 rupees to a maid. That is exchange of service. I hope everybody gets it. But if, let's say, your mother is cooking food in your home, there is no exchange of services here. There is no economic exchange of services here. So such goods and services which are not exchangeable in economic terms, may be exchangeable in real terms, but economic term में कोई exchange नहीं हो रहा है, they would not be part of GDP. So important part here, economy. Economy means only those goods and services which are economically exchangeable. For example, again, somebody in your house, you yourself, maybe somebody in your house does cleaning work in your house. Again, you are not paying for that. You are not being self-paid. Motherhood services, for example, your child has to be taken care of. Your mother or your wife is not charging you or somebody else for taking care of the child. If you employ, let's say, a babysitter, in that case you will be paying to that babysitter. Therefore, that would be something which is exchangeable in the economy. So please mind, such question exam mein when question would be asked in the exam, options would be such. Options would be you may be given some intermediate good that would have to be rejected on the basis of that it is not a final good. You may be given some good which is not produced in your territory. You may be confused by telling that this good was produced but not sold. ये भी एक option हो सकता है. Mind you, you'll have to ensure that if it is produced in this particular year, it would be part of this year's GDP. If it was produced last year but sold this year, ऐसा भी 200 units were not sold. If it was produced last year but sold this year, in which year's GDP would that good be? It would be in last year's GDP. Produced in 2020 but not sold in 2020, sold in 2021. It would be in 2020's GDP, not in 2021's GDP. So produced in an economy, mind you again, goods and services that have economic value, that can be exchanged economically, only those goods or services would be counted here, economy. In a given time period, usually a year. Very important aspect, finally, because it is a flow variable. GDP is a flow variable, not a stock variable. There has to be a given time period, which is usually a year. It can be a quarter, it can be a month, it can be a half year, it can be anything, but usually which is a year. How much is the total value of production in an economy in a particular time period? Usually a year. How much they are producing in a particular time period. I hope this is absolutely clear to everybody that what GDP is. Final value. I hope when I read the definition now, all of you would be revising the explanations that I have given to you. Final value of goods and services produced in an economy in a given time period, usually a year. I hope this is absolutely clear to everybody. I'll make you write these things. I'll emphasize, मैं इसका आपको note दूंगा. I'll make you write this thing. 6:46. Let's take a break. Break ले लेते हैं for about next 10 minutes. Then we'll resume. If there is, acha, I'll answer the questions that I'll answer before we go for a break. I'll answer the questions that are here. ये क्या क्वेश्चन था? मैं this Akshay's question was there. Sir, we studied about equilibrium market price, then taking the current scenario, given that vaccine has a positive impact and there is a huge demand for it, why is there a demand by states and parties to influence and bring down the equilibrium market price? If by external factors the equilibrium market price comes down, the supplier will lose incentive to produce more vaccines. Well, Akshay, that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly good reasoning. I'll answer this question. देखो, price of a good in the market is determined based on demand and supply. How much are producers willing to produce and how much are buyers willing to pay for that particular good. So ultimately it is demand and supply that determines price of a good. In case of vaccines, it becomes an interesting case. Interesting case कैसे है? Why? Because vaccines should be sold like any other good based on demand and supply. Whatever they produce, if it is demanded. However, यहाँ पे demand is very high. Demand is very high and demand is something which is of life saving in nature. Demand एक good की बहुत ज़्यादा है. Plus this is kind of a necessity. It's like pricing water. If you price water obnoxiously high, then in that case people would have no alternative but to die of thirst. If they cannot afford water, they would die of thirst. Number one. Number two, what about incentive of vaccine manufacturers to manufacture vaccine? Certainly this is a very true case that a manufacturer spends a lot of money in investment, in research and development, in developing a particular vaccine and takes a huge risk. For example, there were many companies that were in race for development of vaccines. अब कई सारी companies की vaccine को approval नहीं मिला. Many companies, they developed vaccine, they did not get approval. Maybe Serum Institute, they decided in the month of June that we will go ahead and produce AstraZeneca vaccine, whatever be the result. So they said that we are going to produce this. इसके test के result आएंगे 4, 5, 6, 7 महीने के बाद. But we are going to produce so that later on, if there is an approval, there is no shortage of vaccines. That was their reasoning. So he risked, Serum Institute of India risked tremendous amount of money. They risked it. There was a very high chance, high probability that the vaccine could have been rejected. Therefore, they risked huge amount of capital by investing in advance in production of these vaccines. So yes, manufacturers need to be incentivized. They must have freedom to price. Freedom to price होना चाहिए. At the same time, this freedom to price is being balanced by the necessity of this particular product. Freedom to price because of risk, because of investment, because of research and development, and balanced by the necessity of this product. So ये दोनों चीजें हैं. Simultaneously, these two things work. In such situations where the drug is life-saving, in such situations, usually the state interferes in the market. Rather than market determining the price of vaccine based on demand and supply, the state interferes and keeps an administered price. State एक administered price रखेगा. Yes, that reduces the incentive to develop, that reduces the incentive to R&D, that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly right, not fine. That's perfectly right. It reduces the incentive to R&D, but these are special circumstances in which some kind of intervention becomes necessary. Fine. So this is the answer to your question. I hope your question has been answered. Ankita's question. Can we say that indifference curve is to a consumer what PPF is to a producer? Ankita, I have not discussed indifference curves. I'll not be taking time of class in discussing indifference curve. I'm sorry, I'll not be discussing that. That is good that you are reading microeconomics NCERT, but I will not entertain doubts of that in the class. Okay? Please understand my limitation also. देखो मैं इतनी basic चीज पढ़ा रहा हूँ and I see a question here writing पता नहीं मजे ले रहा है कि नहीं. Somebody is asking sir GVA क्या होता है? मतलब यार seriously you are asking GVA क्या होता है? What you are sleeping or wasting your time here chit chatting? So I cannot. Please understand my limitation. If I talk about these things, then it would create a lot of havoc in the class. What about the case of FDI in expenditure approach? This is Suraj's question. Case of FDI in expenditure approach. देखो, in case of investment also, in case of investment, we did not categorize हमने investment को internal और external तो नहीं किया था. Injections में one of the injections was investments that firms invest. What if there is a foreign investment? That is simply type of investment, but that would be like a booster dose of investment. Booster dose of investment that leads to a higher equilibrium. More investment, usually investment would have been channelized from savings. Domestic households are savings, and therefore that money becomes available to firms to invest. What if external money becomes available? What if external money comes in form of foreign direct investment? That would be even a bigger booster dose of injection. So certainly yes, foreign investment in form of FDI, तो बिल्कुल that will enhance the total output from this expenditure approach. Certainly yes. Next, Mahima's question. Sir, why we can't understand handwriting which have to be sir written on board, so please dictate notes. अच्छा, अरे महिमा मैंने पहले भी बोला था, my handwriting is a little bit poor. I'm not, but I make sure that whatever I write, I repeat it. I make sure that I speak it up also. What about NGOs? Are those expenses counted? Purvi is asking this question. Purvi, I'm not able to understand it. What about which expenses of NGOs? NGOs also exist within the economy. NGOs, think of them as, NGOs के केस में आप उनको सोचो, they are, in most cases, think of them as one factor is not receiving payment, which is entrepreneurship. Factors of production of NGO is also providing some service. It's like a firm, but it is a special firm in which there is no consideration for profits. It is like that special firm. So think of NGO as a firm, जहाँ पे यूजुअली जो 4 फैक्टर्स होते हैं वहां पे केवल 3 है. एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप वाला फैक्टर नहीं है. एज इन एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप के अगेंस्ट पेमेंट प्रॉफिट वाला फैक्टर नहीं है. सो इट्स अ नॉट फॉर प्रॉफिट फर्म. सो यू कैन थिंक ऑफ इट लाइक दिस एंड सिंपली देयर इज नो चेंज दैट एनजीओ ब्रिंग्स. इट कैन बी कंसिडर्ड जस्ट लाइक एनी अदर फर्म. फाइन, चलो तो 6:53. लेट्स मीट एट 7 o'clock. लेट्स मीट एट 7 o'clock. Any question that you have, you may ask. I'll try to answer that question. Let's meet at 7 o'clock. 7:54 हो गए हैं, तो let's meet at about 7:75. Okay. I hope you people are back. चलो, let's take down some notes. You have been asking for notes, and जैसे मैंने बोला था, थोड़ा सा पढ़ाने के बाद, once we finish up a topic, then after that we start to write notes. So let's take up notes now. Let's write some notes. Give heading circular flow of income. Give heading circular flow of income. Write down the circular flow model. The circular flow model is a simplistic representation of the economy. The circular flow model is a simplistic representation of the economy which is used circular flow model is a simplistic representation of the economy which is used to visualize the flow of money, which is used to visualize the flow of money amongst various agents in the economy, which is used to visualize the flow of money amongst various agents in the economy, and through that estimate the total value of, and through that estimate the total value of output produced in the economy, and through that estimate the total value of output produced in the economy. Full stop. The households in an economy provide various factors of production. The households in an economy provide various factors of production, bracket में land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship. The households in the economy provide various factors of production, bracket में land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship, to the firms which the firms which the firms use to produce goods and services, comma, which are then sold back to the households, full stop. Next paragraph में write down the value of output produced in the economy, would then be equal to the value of expenditure done in the economy, comma, which in turn would be equal to the value of incomes received by the households. Next paragraph में write down in this model we have assumed that there are no leakages in form of savings, taxes or imports, comma, neither have we assumed injections in the form of investments by the firms, comma, government expenditure or exports, bracket में लिखो, that is foreigners buying domestically produced goods, bracket close, goods and services, that should be implicit, bracket close, full stop. Even after incorporating injections and leakages, the essential conclusion the essential conclusion that incomes are equal to expenditures, incomes are equal to expenditure, which is equal to value of output produced, which is equal to value of output produced in the economy, comma, does not change. Essential conclusion, which is this, comma, does not change. Next paragraph, write down the magnitude of injections or leakages. The magnitude of injections or leakages will only change whether the economy change word mat likho please, sorry, change word ki jagah cut out the word change and write down decide, will only decide. The magnitude of injections and leakages will only decide whether the economy grows or contracts, whether the economy grows or contracts. That is the values of incomes, comma, expenses, comma, output. The values of incomes, expenses, outputs increases or decreases. ठीक है. नेक्स्ट पैराग्राफ लिखो. measuring the total output of the economy is usually done through these three different approaches. First, write down income approach. Value of output is equals to sum of all the incomes received by the factors of production. Value of output is equals to sum of incomes received by all factors of production. Write down, जैसे ये लिखा था ना, कहाँ था? हाँ, write down this write down land, rent, labor, wages, capital, interest, entrepreneurship, profit. Write down, please write this thing now, and then write down incomes is equals to, total income is equals to rent plus wage plus interest plus profit. Total income is equals to rent plus wage plus interest plus profit. Write this thing now. ठीक है, I hope you have written this. Next, write down expenditure approach. Write down expenditure approach. Write down total output of the economy. Total output of the economy is equals to sum of total expenditure being done in the economy. Sum of total expenditure being done in the economy. Write this down, write this thing. households consumption expenditure, businesses investment expenditure, government expenditure, and foreigners foreign expenditure. I'll wait for 20 seconds. Write down households consumption, businesses investment, government expenditure, and foreigners foreign expenditure. Write down total output is equals to C plus G plus I plus bracket में x minus m. Total output is equals to C plus G plus I plus bracket में x minus m. C plus G plus I plus bracket में x minus m. Want to label it? Write down m is equals to imports, x is equals to exports, C consumption, G government, I investment expenditure by businesses. You want to label it? You can label it. Expenditure approach. I hope everybody has written, everybody is done with this expenditure approach. Next, write down third, production method. Write down. In production method, we calculate the total output of the economy. We calculate the total output of the economy by summing up in product method, we calculate the total output of the economy by summing up the value added by all the firms in the economy. Value of output, write down, value of output is equals to value of output by a firm is equals to value of intermediate goods consumed by the firm. Value of output by a firm is equals to value of intermediate goods consumed by the firm plus value of output by the firm is equals to value of intermediate goods consumed by the firm plus the value added by the firm Therefore, value added, you can write like this, value added. Therefore, value added is equals to value of output. मैं इसलिए लिख रहा हूं so that you write it in equation form only. Value added is equals to value of output minus value of intermediate goods. Write this, I've just written it so that you write it in an equation form. Value added is equals to value of output minus value of intermediate goods. Write down. Next line में लिखो. Summing up the value added by all the firms. Summing up the value added by all the firms comma, summing up the value added by all the firms, comma, write down sigma GVAI. I'll write it here. यहाँ पे लिख देता हूँ. Sigma GVAI, comma के बाद ये लिखना, summing up the value added by all the firms, comma, that is sigma GVAI. We arrive at the total value of output produced by the economy. The total value of output produced by the economy. If you want to write these equations that I have written here, you may write. Otherwise, you will get these slides. चलो लिख लो, write down, write these things down. अभी ये ऊपर वाली मत लिखना, इन्वेंट्री वाली मत लिखना, पहले ये लिखो. First write down this. This you have written already. Value added, वो आपने लिख लिया. Value added is equal to value of output produced minus value of intermediate goods. This you have written. This is simply GVA is equals to VAI minus ZI. GVAI is equals to VAI minus ZI. This is what this is. Write down. ये वाली चीज लिखो. Value of output. Simply write this. Value of output. जो मैं बोल रहा हूं उसके बाद वैसे whatever I am speaking, write that thing down. Value of output produced. Write this thing down. Value of output produced is equals to value of sales plus value of change in inventory. Value of output produced is equals to value of sales plus value of change in inventories. Next line में we'll write an explanation. पहले equation लिख लो, उसके बाद we'll write an explanation for this. Value of output produced is equals to value of sales plus value of change in inventories. लिखो, इसके नीचे लिखो. Now write down explanation. Write down. Write down. A firm may not be able to sell. A firm may not be able to sell its entire production. A firm may not be able to sell its entire production in a particular year. Which leads to accumulation of inventories. Full stop. At the same time, some inventories may be carried forward from previous years. May be carried forward from previous years. Full stop. The change in inventory by a firm, not by a firm, the change in inventory of the firm in a particular year is treated as investment. The change in inventory of a firm in a particular year is treated as investment. ब्रैकेट में लिखना चाहो तो लिख लो by convention is treated as investment by convention. एक बॉक्स बना के स्टार लगा के एक पॉइंट लिख लेते हैं, इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट. मेक अ बॉक्स एंड स्टार लगा के राइट डाउन अ पॉइंट. Investment in economics comprises of investment in economics comprises of three important components. Investment in economics comprises of three important components. First, change in inventories. First is change in inventories. Second, expenditure on procurement of capital goods. Expenditure on procurement of capital goods. इसमें आगे डैश लगाओ इसमें, expenditure on procurement of capital goods. This is called gross fixed capital formation. This is called gross fixed capital formation. And third, investment in residential buildings. Investment in residential buildings. Bracket में लिख लो. This is a very small part. This is a very small part. This is a very small part. Bracket close. Next line में लिखो within the box. Within this box, I mean box तो बाद में बनाना जब once we are done with this investment वाला part, the box बना लेना. Next line में लिखो investment in financial instruments. Investment in financial instruments. Investment in financial instruments is not treated. Investment in financial instruments is not treated as investment in economics terms. Investment in financial instruments is not treated as investment in economics terms. Full stop. Economics investment is. Economics के बाद apostrophe. Economics apostrophe last में. Economics investment is investment. Economics investment is investment that results in increase of productive capacity. Economics investment is investment that results in increase of productive capacity. Full stop. अब ये जो investment वाला part है, all this investment part, put it in a box. This was something separate from what we were discussing. So put this all investment thing in a box. Next, continue this what we were writing here. Gross value added is also composed of the depreciation expenditure. Gross value added is also composed of the depreciation expenditure that the firm undertakes in a particular year. Gross value added is also composed of depreciation expenditure that a firm undertakes in a particular year. Full stop. Subtracting this, we get the net value added. Subtracting this, we get the net value added. Next line में equation form में लिख लो. NVA equation form में write down exactly this thing what we have written. Net value added is equals to GVAI minus DI. Write this thing down. NVAI is equals to GVAI minus DI. Next line में write down GDP is equals to sigma GVAI. GDP is equals to sigma GVAI. Write this thing down. Now give heading GDP. Now give heading GDP, gross domestic product. Write down gross domestic product. Write down definition. First we'll write down the definition. Write down GDP is defined as the final value. GDP is defined as the final value of goods and services. The final value of goods and services produced in an economy. Final value of goods and services produced in an economy in a given time period. In a given time period, comma, usually a year. Usually a year. Now we'll highlight all the words that we emphasized on. I hope you have written the definition. GDP is defined as final value of all the goods and services produced in an economy in a given time period, usually a year. Now from next line से लिखेंगे, we will emphasize on, we'll write this definition almost vertically and write explanation of each and every word. ठीक है, जैसे हमने भी ऐसे, we have written this definition like this. Now we'll write each and every word and then we'll write the meaning of that word. What does that word convey? Write down, first write down final value. Write down the word final value. Final value, dash लगाओ आगे and write down final value, dash लगा के लिखो आगे final value. It means that only final goods are taken into consideration. It means that only final goods are taken into consideration while calculating GDP. While calculating GDP. Next, produced. Write down the word produced. Produced. Produce के आगे लिखो produced. It means it is not just the goods which are sold in a year. It is not just the goods which are sold in a year. Rather, the goods which are produced, that have to be counted. Rather, the goods which are produced that have to be counted. Full stop. लिखो इसमें आगे, इसी में produce के आगे लिखो. Write down goods produced in previous year. Goods produced in previous year but sold this year. Goods produced in previous year but sold this year would be counted in previous year's GDP. Goods produced in previous year but sold this year would be counted in previous year's GDP. Full stop. Next, final value of goods and services produced. Now next write down the word in. Capital में लिखना the word in. In. Next line में write down the word in. Write down. It signifies the importance of geographical boundary in which it signifies the importance of geographical boundary in which production is taking place. In which production is taking place. For example, it will include production in territorial waters. It will include production in territorial waters, comma, production in embassies located in foreign countries. Production in embassies located in foreign countries, comma, not include production in foreign embassies located in home country, not include production in foreign embassies located in home country, comma, etc. etc. Next, write down economy, emphasis of the word economy, write down economy को आगे emphasize करेंगे, economy dash लगा के लिखो. It means, the word economy, and write down dash लगा के economy, it means all goods and services which have an economic value, all goods and services which have an economic value will be included, and those which are not exchanged, and those which are exchanged oblique produced, and those which are exchanged oblique produced without any economic consideration, will not be included in GDP. Example, food prepared at home by the family, food prepared at home by the family for their own consumption, or for others as well, if they do not sell, comma, will not be included in country's GDP, ठीक है. लास्ट में यूजुअली अ ईयर, इफ यू वांट टू राइट डाउन टाइम पीरियड, राइट डाउन, लिख लो, लिख ही नहीं तो राइट डाउन टाइम पीरियड, डैश लगा के लिख लो टाइम पीरियड. GDP is a flow variable. That is measured over a period of time. ठीक है. चलो अब लिख रहे हैं तो एक काम करते हैं, थोड़ा सा और लिख लेते हैं. इफ यू वांट, आई मीन व्हाट आई हैव नॉट टोल्ड एज येट, लेट मी डिक्टेट सम ऑफ दोज थिंग्स एंड देन इट्स 7:38, so we have about 20-25 minutes, so there is an ample time. थोड़ा सा और लिख लो and then I'll explain. Last 10 minutes I'll explain what I'll make you write. लिखने में तो I don't think so there is any issue, बहुत chill है लिखना तो. Rehan's question is, if inventory is investment, then there should be no loss incurred by the firms, considering no depreciation for now. No loss incurred by, really interesting question. Others, please also listen. Rehan's question is really good question. If inventory is investment, then there should be no loss incurred by the firms. Well, Rehan, we have not talked about profits or loss. As in, if firm is not able to sell, we are counting that as addition to inventory. I hope you are listening. If firm is not able to sell, we are counting that as an addition to inventory. However, for the firm, अगर हम firm को देखें, for the firm, it incurred costs in production of 1000, but it sold only 800. 200 are still lying unsold. 200 अभी भी unsold है. So for the firm, when firm prepares its books, what will it do? It will say that we have not been able to sell 200. For accounting purposes, accounting करने के लिए, लिखने के लिए, बही खाता बनाने के लिए, to make a ledger, to make a statement of their accounts, what they will do is they will include those 200 unsold units as part of their inventory, which is categorized as investment. However, in real terms, have they not incurred a loss? They have. But that loss should not affect, and obviously it is not affecting our essential conclusion that value of goods produced is equal to value of expenditure received, because in this case expenditure received को हमने supplement कर दिया है 200 rupees of inventories से. Inventories being investment expenditure, so we have added 800 plus 200. So for our purposes we have included it like that. So इसलिए by convention we are doing. So certainly yes, that is a loss, but loss का कोई, there is no meaning of loss in this case. Okay, write down. Next, give heading measurement of GDP. Give heading measurement of GDP at various points. Measurement of GDP at various points. Measurement of, give subheading measurement of GDP at various points. Write down. GDP can be measured. I have not yet explained these things. I will explain once I dictate. So पहले dictate कर, because we are in flow of writing. So let me dictate and then I will explain. Right now, GDP can be measured. GDP can be measured at various price points. GDP can be measured at various price points. Full stop. Write down. GDP essentially is a measure of total output. GDP essentially is a measure of total output. GDP essentially is a measure of total output. Output is valued. Output, full stop के बाद, output is valued at a particular price. Output is valued at a particular price. Full stop. Depending on which price we choose, depending on which price we choose to value the output, depending on which price we choose to value the output, comma, we can calculate GDP, we can calculate GDP at various price points. We can calculate GDP at various price points. Next paragraph में write down. Measurement, give a subheading, measurement at different prices, ये subheading है, measurement at different prices in the production chain, measurement at different prices in the production chain, measurement at different prices in the production chain. इसमें write down 3 points, 1 2 3, write down 3 points. Factor cost, factor cost, basic price and market price. 3 price points in production chain, in the production process. 3 price points. Factor cost, first is factor cost. I have not explained, I will explain. I have not explained any of these things, but मैं आपको लिखवा रहा हूं. Factor cost, basic price, market price. 3 price points here. Next subheading though, measurement of prices at different times. Measurement of prices at different times. Measurement of prices at different times. इसमें there are 2. Write down. First, current prices, and number 2, constant prices, comma, including base year's prices, constant prices, comma, including base year's prices. ठीक है, अब ये लिखा. अब now let me explain. Now I'll explain, and remaining dictation maybe if time permits then today or otherwise tomorrow. Different points of measurement. We discussed, I've told you that GDP is value of output produced in the economy. Now output is produced. Let's say 10 pens are produced, 20 keyboards are produced. You cannot add 10 pens to 20 keyboards. You have to add value of 10 pens to value of 20 keyboards. So this is how you calculate GDP. You are adding the value, total value. Now, what is the price that you should take? Should you take, for example, value of pen at wholesale level, at retail level, at factory level? What is the value of price value of pen that you should take? If you are measuring, you have to be consistent. अगर सारे goods का price, all the goods that you are measuring, calculating the value of, if you are calculating value of all the goods, either you measure them at retail prices, the market price which is available in the economy, or you measure at, let's say, wholesale price, or you measure at, let's say, factory price, at what price is the factory selling. There has to be consistency in the measurement of price, in which price point you choose. So depending upon which price point we choose, there are 2 ways to choose different price points. One is choosing different price points in the production chain. In the production chain, choosing different price points there. That is one. And second is choosing different price points at different times. Do you take price of present day, today's price, to measure the output, or you take price of some past year or price of year before that? Which price do you take? Now these prices are separated by time. They are different in time. So which price point do you take in order to calculate the value of your output? So there are various price points. The point is that there are various prices that we can take in order to calculate the value of output. As I said, these prices can be separated, these prices can be different in your production chain, or these can be एक तरीके से horizontal, or these can be over a particular time period. Now let's discuss the concepts of production chain and this time period wale prices. Let's discuss the concept of market price, basic price and factor cost. Similarly, current price, previous year, this PY is previous year's price, or some any other constant price, Let's discuss these concepts. Market price should be very obvious, very intuitively obvious to you. Market price means when you are measuring the total output of the economy at current market prices. Measuring the total output of the economy at current market prices, that is what market price is. Simply you go out and see, okay, what is the value at which a product is available in the market. मार्केट में प्रोडक्ट का रेट क्या है, दैट इज व्हाट मार्केट प्राइस इज. नाउ मार्केट, बेसिक एंड फैक्टर कॉस्ट. this basic price is please listen carefully. This basic price is a little bit recent addition. Basic price के ऊपर earlier we did not used to measure goods at this basic price. I have not yet told what this basic price is. मैंने अभी नहीं बताया, maybe I'm just telling you. This basic price is a relatively recent addition to these different price points. Earlier, conventionally, in most of your economic literature, in most of your economics books, you will find mention of only market price and factor cost. You will find mention of only these two things. You will not find mention of basic price in your conventional economic literature. These are what are commonly mentioned there. So first I'll explain the concept of market and factor, and then this new concept of basic I'll explain after that. So what is this market price? Market price, as I explained, market price is the price that exists in the market today. आज की तारीख में, today, right now, what is the market price? Market price is price of any good available in the market. I go to the market and I buy that good. What is the actual? I have to go to the market and buy a good. I will pay what is the price that exists today. So that is what market price is. The most tangible, the most real price. The word real बाद में आएगा, अभी थोड़ा ध्यान रखना. Market price is the most actual, most tangible, most visible price which is there. तो market price सबसे आसान है. Factor cost क्या है? Factor cost. Understand the term factor cost first. Factor cost means cost incurred due to factors of production. Factors of production. Cost incurred due to factors of production. Something is being manufactured and that good, there are factors of production being used in manufacture of that good. What is the cost incurred due to factors of production? That is what factor cost is. Now, जो हमने circular model of economy देखा है, in that factor cost and market price का distinction, there was no distinction of factor cost and market price. But in real life, there is a distinction between factor cost and market price. The actual cost that the firm incurs in manufacturing a good, in producing a good, including its profits, the actual cost, that is the factor cost that a firm incurs in manufacturing a good, is usually different from the price at which that good is sold in the market. Why? Because on this factor cost, there are indirect taxes, plus government may also give some subsidies. Government कुछ subsidies भी दे सकती है. There are indirect taxes which are levied usually, and also the government may give some subsidy. Let's say, for example, sugar. Sugar is available in the market at the rate of 40 rupees per kg. This is market price of sugar. Market price of sugar is 40 rupees per kg. However, this market price consists of, let's say, 5 rupees of taxes and 10 rupees of subsidy. Let's say that consists of this 5 rupees of taxes and 10 rupees of subsidy. I'll repeat. Let's say you go to the market and you buy sugar from there. Sugar is available at 40 rupees per kg. However, this 40 rupees per kg comprises of 5 rupees taxes that you pay and 10 rupees subsidy that you get. Therefore, what is the actual cost of sugar? Sugar की actual cost क्या है? Actual cost of sugar should be 40 minus 5 plus 10. Taxes have the effect of increasing the cost of a good. Let's say cost of a good is X. Taxes are levied on this, therefore the price would increase by this tax amount. Subsidies have effect of reducing the price of that good. So taxes increase, subsidies decrease. Let me write IT, indirect taxes here. What are indirect taxes? We will study in taxation chapter. Market price, market price would be cost of factors of production or factor cost plus indirect taxes minus subsidies. I hope this is clear to everybody. If any subsidy is provided, market price जो actual cost production में incur हुई है, the actual cost that has been incurred in production, market price would increase because of that if taxes are levied on it. Obviously चीज है, अगर tax levy होगा तो price बढ़ जाएगा, you will be paying high price. And if government is, let's say, giving some subsidy, then that would have the effect of lowering the price for you. So subsidies reduce the price, taxes increase the price. So cost that is actually incurred in factors of production due to factors of production is usually different from the price at which the good is sold in the market. At what price do we calculate GDP? Do we calculate GDP at market price or factor cost? Point is, we have to be consistent whichever price we are taking. GDP can be calculated at market price. When you write down GDP is calculated market price, you specify here. आप यहाँ पे specify करोगे MP. You will specify here market price, GDP at market price. You will specify here. Value of goods produced, total value of goods produced in the economy at market price would be equal to total value of goods produced at factor cost plus total indirect taxes minus total subsidies given. Is it clear to everybody? I hope this should be clear. GDP at market price would be equal to market price किसके बराबर है? Market price is equal to factor cost plus taxes minus subsidies. So GDP, the value of goods, the value of all the goods in the economy, that should be equal to, quite obvious, value of all the goods in the economy should be equal to value of all the goods at factor cost plus total indirect tax that are levied on all the goods, what is the total indirect tax, minus on all the goods, what are the total subsidies levied. So this is how we relate GDP at market price and factor cost. GDP at market price is equal to GDP at factor cost plus total indirect taxes minus total subsidies given. We write it conventionally, we write it simply as this: GDP MP is equals to GDP FC plus IT minus S. We write it simply as this: indirect taxes minus subsidies. We write it simply as this, like this. So this is relationship between market price and factor cost. I hope there is clarity, you have got clarity about what is market price and what is factor cost. We can measure GDP at any of these prices. We want to measure at factor cost, we can measure it. We want to measure at market price, we can measure. There is no hard and fast rule ki kis pe karni hai. But whatever we are measuring at, we have to be consistent that we are measuring prices of all goods at factor cost, prices of all goods at market price if we are measuring at market price. And GDP at market price would be equal to GDP at factor cost plus indirect taxes minus subsidies. Always, this question has been asked multiple times in exam. Always remember this, that market price would be equal to factor cost plus taxes minus subsidies. Market price would be increased by taxes, therefore you have to add them. Would be reduced by subsidies, therefore you have to subtract them. इसका देखो confusion कैसे हो जाता है एग्जाम में they will be asking GDP at factor cost. So now you'll have to rearrange this equation. I hope everybody can do this. Would be equal to GDP at market price minus taxes now plus subsidy. You have rearranged. ये इधर आ गया, ये इधर चला गया. So you have rearranged this. All right. So this is about calculation of GDP at market price and factor cost. Basic price I have not yet done. Now I'll talk about what is this basic price. अब मैं बताता हूं बेसिक प्राइस क्या होता है. बेसिक प्राइस, बेसिक प्राइस इट विल टेक टाइम. तो बेसिक प्राइस आई टीच टुमारो. बेसिक प्राइस कर बताऊंगा, बट basic price I'll teach tomorrow. Basic price is going to take about 10-15 minutes. What I'll do is in 5 minutes only I'll teach you about that. All of you know I'll talk about current prices and base year's price, constant price. That I'll teach about. वो उसमें it will take only 5 minutes. So basic price I'll teach tomorrow. Even though it's part of what I've discussed but I'll keep it tomorrow because it is going to take a lot of time. Current prices and constant prices. Current prices simply means prices prevailing in current year. Your GDP, जो आपकी GDP है, GDP is represented, the standard notation of representing GDP is Y, total output. GDP is represented as Y, total output. Is equals to value of total output. This is value of total output. GDP or Y is equal to value of total output. I hope this is clear to everyone. ये तो हम 50,000 बार कर चुके हैं. If you want to realize this, if you want to have a feel about this total output, it can be thought of as total quantity multiplied by price level. Total quantity multiplied by some price level. Now, you cannot add, let's say, 20 pens and 30 keyboards and multiply them by an average price. आप ये चीज ऐड नहीं कर सकते हो. This total quantity and price levels, they are conveying the idea. This Y is equals to Y is equals to some Q multiplied by P. This is conveying the idea. It is not quantity multiplied by price, but it can be thought of as quantity multiplied by price. It is conveying the idea that the final value of your output can be, if you can reduce all the goods produced, quantities of all the goods produced to a common number, some Q, that is, which is signifying their quantity, and reduce the price of all the different items to a common number P. Reduce quantity to some quantity, some abstract number Q's, reduce price to some abstract number, which is denoting some price level, general price level. जैसे हम बोलते हैं ना, inflation है, prices are increasing. We say that there is inflation, prices are increasing. What prices are increasing? We say in general prices are increasing. कि एक पर्टिकुलर ग्रुप का नहीं, 5-6 ग्रुप्स के प्राइस बढ़ रहे हैं. some group of items their prices are increasing, some group of items their prices may be decreasing. We say in general prices are rising. Prices. So what is the term prices? Prices is some abstract understanding of price that we have in our mind, some general price level. So we can reduce all the prices in the economy to some abstract price level and reduce all the quantities produced to some abstract quantity level. So this is what GDP is essentially. Quantity produced multiplied by the prices. यही GDP है. Which price do you take? Prices can be current year price. When you calculate GDP at current year's price, you simply call it current year's GDP or current market price based GDP. If you are taking market price, you call it current year's GDP. Prices can be base years price. The concept of base year I'll explain tomorrow, but it is not necessary that you take current year's price. Quantity of this year multiplied by price of last year, or price of year before that, or price of 5 years before today. That will also give you this year's GDP but measured at some other year's price. Why do we do that? We do this because it becomes easy for us then to compare change in actual output. Last year, let's say in 2020, prices were less, and in 2021 prices are very high. Without actually increasing the total production, we can increase the total GDP. Let's say हमारी GDP में केवल केले produce होते हैं. Let's say only bananas are produced in our GDP. So value of bananas in 2020 is 10 rupees. Value of bananas in 2021 is 30 rupees. Let's say we produce 10 kgs bananas in 2020, 10 kgs banana in 2021. So 10 kgs multiplied by 10 rupees is the total output of 2020, that is 100 rupees. And 10 kgs multiplied by 30 rupees, that is 300 rupees, is the total output of 2021. Actual quantity में कुछ change हुआ है? Has there been an actual change in some actual quantity? No. Last year also you were producing 10 kg, this year also you are producing 10 kg. Simply there is a change in price. केवल price change हुआ है, nothing else has changed. Maybe bananas are in huge demand this year. So is there any change in real aspect of GDP? Your real production, has it increased? No, it has not. That is why in order to compare this year's GDP with last year's GDP, what you can do is you can take price of last year. Last year ka price लो to estimate the value of this year's GDP. This year's GDP would then be this year's quantity multiplied by previous year's price, some constant price of previous year. So this is GDP at current price or GDP at some constant price of some other year. In this other years or some previous years, there is a very special year called base year. एक special year होता है base year, जिसके बारे में हम कल बात करेंगे. Tomorrow we will talk about this base year concept and talk about this basic price concept. अच्छा कल नहीं है यार, sorry यार कल नहीं है, मतलब whenever the next classes, then we will talk about that. Fine, ठीक है, चलो तो I'll leave the class here. Exhausting class for me, maybe for you as well. If taxes are included in market price, then why we have to pay GST? पहली बात, Debanjan, we have not discussed GST, but for your understanding, this is a question that I can answer right now. Taxes are included in market price, then why do we have to pay GST? Are you charged GST over and above some market price? No. Market price that you pay is inclusive of GST. Whenever somebody charges you something, somebody would say, okay, the price is 1 lakh rupees exclusive of GST. So 1 lakh rupees is not market price. Market price is 1 lakh rupees plus GST. So market price ki definition ही. By definition, market price includes taxes and excludes subsidy, or includes the effects of taxes and includes the effect of subsidies. So by definition. Fine. Chalo. I saw the class is over. Fine. Good night, everybody. I was seeing some of the comments by some people. Dekho, it affects me, it affects my energy, and most importantly, it affects the class. This response portal is meant to have a healthy interaction in the class. It is not meant to create negativity. It is not meant to distract others or get yourself distracted. अगर आपका मन नहीं लगता है क्लास में, I'm sorry, I'm not up to your standards, expectations. Please leave the class. पैसे तो आपने दे दिए, पैसे तो आपको वापस नहीं मिलेंगे. You have given money. Maybe we both can try to improve our behavior. I can try to improve my way of teaching. You may try to improve your concentration, and hence both of us will be able to achieve a better outcome for each one of us. ठीक है? क्लास में डिस्टर्बेंस क्रिएट मत किया करो. It affects me a lot. It affects other students a lot. And उससे वैसे ही देखो it creates the negativity. Nobody benefits from that. We can have a positive environment of discussions, of feedbacks in the class. You can give your feedbacks to your coordinators, to other people. You can give your feedbacks. Certainly, I also received feedbacks, especially regarding dictation of notes, regarding some of the topics that you found complex. Maybe I should not have introduced those topics as soon as I did in the class. Anyways, I also take that feedback positively. You should also give that feedback positively, rather than creating an environment of mistrust. Some of the students which are continuously spamming, trust me, there is no, आपका कुछ हो नहीं सकता है. Those who are continuously spamming and creating negativity, आपका कुछ नहीं हो सकता. You are on your own. Even if I want to help you, you don't seek my help. So therefore, I would not be able to help. Certainly, I am available for you to help if you try to improve your behavior. So kindly do not disturb others through your acts. Fine? Chalo. Take care, everybody. Good night. We'll see each other whenever our next class is. Stay happy, stay safe, stay positive, not COVID positive. Fine? Chalo. Bye.